Well, good morning, folks. This is going to be a fantastic interview. I'm with Steve Lumsdaine. We're going to talk secret men's business, but not so secret. Steve, welcome to our Leading Your Best Life podcast.
Hi, Leigh.
Mate, you did a marvellous job the other night at our Blokes Talk Beachside session. You talked about a whole range of points, but before we get to some of those, by way of background, tell me a bit about the Steve Lumsdaine story. Where have you come from? What's been the evolution of Steve Lumsdaine to be where he is today?
Right. Well, I was born in Sydney in 1941. I'm the firstborn of my parents. My father at the time was in the regular army, and he was stationed in Sydney. He was the last person off the ships that left the harbour. My mother tells me. I don't remember that.
Wow.
We moved later to. He was then relocated to Fort Scratchley, which is on the mouth of the Hunter River. And so we moved to Newcastle. And I think for a few years I had access to my father. He would some nights ride home on his bicycle. Whether he was supposed to or not, I'm not sure.
All right. You suggesting he might have had a beer or two or something, or what do you mean?
Well, he might have had. At some stage I had a sister born, so I suspect there was some toing and froing certainly going on there.
Right.
So I have three younger sisters, and most of my family are in Bellingen, of my ancestors on the me and older generation are around Bellingen, Coffs Harbour, that area.
Okay, beautiful.
So, yeah. We moved back to Sydney when I was about 13 or 14, fourth year high school, and I finished my high school at Homebush High in Sydney, and I'd been offered an aeronautical engineering cadetship with de Havillands, and I left school and was quite happy to sit and wait for my leaving results to come out. But my mother had other ideas, and she said, there's a job going up at Channel 7, which was just on the hill behind us, and I'm going past there shortly. I will drop you off. So that started my career in television. It was the second year of commercial television in Australia. And I did mention the other night that many years later, I was interviewed by a guy named Brendan Horgan, who did a series called Radio with Pictures. And he interviewed a lot of us who were from the early years of television. And I think Beverly Gledhill referred him to me. Bev and I had been at Channel 7 in Sydney together, and then she got a job at 7 in Perth, and Gordon McCollum, he was a cameraman, I was doing studio lighting, and we, on our holidays, decided we'd go visit Beverly. And when we got to Channel 7 in Perth, which was at a newspaper house at the time, their offices, they said, do you want jobs? And we said, sure. So I didn't even go home again. So Gordon went home, got out. And I think the tender age of 17 or 18, I was the lighting director for Channel 7 in Perth.
Okay.
And I had put my age up a little bit. But and the interesting story around that was that later, when they introduced superannuation, they needed to see our birth certificates. And Frank Moss was the company secretary, and he was a lovely guy. And I kept putting off. In the end, I went to him and said, look, Frank, sorry, I'm not actually that old. I'm 2 years younger. And he went, never mind. And he crossed out what was in the books, and that was it. And I'd had 3 months of anguish and concern.
Right.
And years later, I saw him again at the time when I was a company secretary. And I gave him my card, and he said, how could you be a company secretary? So So Channel 7, early days was exciting, was new, it was novel, there were parties regularly. It was a great place to be working, even if I think it took me about 7 or 8 years to realise we were just selling junk to the masses. But the actual work was teamwork, and that was what was so appealing about it. Everyone involved was an expert in their subject, in their trade profession, and we worked together to produce live television. And we did that from 7 in the morning through to last thing at night. So that was when I learned about teamwork, I think, and that I still look back at that time as being satisfactory working experience, because we had a clear intention, and we did it. We rehearsed it, and then we did it later when video recordings came in. Things got different because the whole technology changed. Then you could stop and re-edit. And although the early days, the editing of 2-inch videotape was quite complex, and they didn't do it. And I remember a singer woman, I don't remember her name, being told, "You mustn't stop. We're not going to stop. We're not going to stop. If you make a mistake, make a mistake." So she sang halfway through a song. She fluffed it, and she said, "Oh fuck!"
Oh no!
So they said, "Stop." So they had to stop
and go to tape.
Yeah, so I edit the tape. But that was good. I met my first wife through. She appeared on Rolf Harris's Children's Channel 7. She was a newly arrived Italian. She and her sister came from Rome, and their father had been here for 15 years after World War II. He interestingly was a sculptor, and he still has some statues around the Olympic Park in Rome. But at the time, he was working on a bronze casting of Mussolini, and they had cast up to the knee, and you could stand inside the foot.
Wow!
And it all got down. And he says of the fascists, I'm a pacifist, but I would line them all up and shoot them.
Yeah. Things you remember, what people said, a powerful life impacts on people. So you met your first wife there at Channel 7, yeah?
Yep, and at the tender age of 20, on my 20th birthday, with my parents' consent, we got married, and jumped in my Morris Minor and went to yelling up Cave's house, yelling up, which amusingly at the time was being run by the parents of an ex-girlfriend of mine. There you go.
Mate, sounds like a story. So how did you tell me the evolution that got you interested in this whole men's mental health area? How did that emerge?
Well, I first saw a program when I left 7, went to the ABC, and I guess that's another episode of what I think most of the major decisions in my life I class as guided apathy. Somebody says to me, "Why don't you do that?" And I go, "Oh, yeah, all right." So I went to the ABC based on a mentor of mine at Channel 7, knowing that there was a vacancy and knowing the chief engineer. And so I went and applied and moved to the ABC. But part of what I remember was watching a program on these people who were exchanging time, and they weren't professional counsellors, and they were counselling each other, and then they were swapping roles and dividing the time.
But why were you interested in that? I mean, why was your radar up at that point?
It struck me as being a very reasonable way to manage one's life, to structure in time for just talking and healing and and there's not a lot of skill involved in that.
No.
It's a lot of unlearning that the professional people are sometimes.
But why did you feel you had healing that had to be done by that stage? Because clearly you must have been receptive to the message. So what did you feel at that point? There was your life either needed structure, or there was some healing that had to be done. What was the trigger there?
And it was probably 6 or 7 years before I actually came upon this technique, and once again I'd organised a confest out at Nannup. We'd moved. My wife was a medical technologist, and I was an engineer by then. I'd got a cadetship at the ABC. Same thing, same person who'd suggested I go to the ABC went himself and ended up as head of training and said, "Do you want to be an engineer? Give me an application. I've got a cadetship here." So I had a couple of years to finish off some study that I'd started, and ended up with a degree in communication.
So straight away, that's the role of mentoring. And we've often talked about it in the podcast, how very timely conversations can literally change our life. Like, so here's this person on at least 2 occasions. He's gone, one joined the ABC, then he's gone, "Hey, why don't you try this?" You've called it guided apathy, but it's literally the right person with the right conversation at the right time, and there you are. Your life takes a whole other course.
Yeah, and look, I suppose I left home early. I mean, I'd left home on holidays and never went back. And in those days, you didn't just jump on I didn't just jump on a plane.
No. Perth was a long way away, eh?
A phone call was a serious business.
Yes. Right? What year what are you talking about in the early 1960s by this stage, eh? Mid-60s?
I think.
When you came over?
I was in 1958, 59, I think it was, when you can look up when Channel 7.
Well, I know my old swimming coach, Fred Bartlett, was one of the first technicians, because they were getting telecasts ready for the Melbourne Olympics in 1956. So I think television started in and around 56, from what I recall.
In Sydney and Melbourne, but later in...
later. A couple of years later in Perth,
Yeah. Look, men, there are men I can think of who I worked with who were older and wiser and had time for me. And I remember when I became an engineer, the guy in my next office was he was head of something in the production area. But we both worked late to avoid the traffic, but the last hour of our work was in conversation, and we chatted about everything. And it was funny because he was very much into similes and flowery language, and I would say, "Warwick, just tell me in plain English."
Yeah.
And he'd say, "No, it would lose something if I did that."
Well, he's right, isn't he? The ambiguity factor, where you put your own meaning in between the gaps.
Yeah, so that was good. So you asked me, well, I think I was homesick for a few years without knowing it. It was like, and eventually my parents came to visit. My parents and 2 of my sisters and their families all did a round Australia tour. But by that time we were living at Nannup, which was when I organised this Confest thing, which was just a festival of alternate views. And at that time we were, there was a Sustainable Communities Association exploring, alternate possibilities for living. And we were very much into permaculture. I met Bill Mollison through all that. I sat one night in a tent with Jim Cairns and counselled him, actually.
Really?
That was at the stage where he was, I think, selling his book at festivals in Melbourne. But he came to one of our contests.
Well, I know he certainly had alternative views. The fact that he was so high up in the Labor Party with those, we might call it semi-hippie views, It was quite, modern for the time, I suppose. If you're in and around that group, you're certainly advanced thinkers in terms of community living and sharing and sustainable development and all those things.
Yeah, I look at it. Well, I think the permaculture, for example, Bill Mollison came and did a rural workshop at our place in Manor, and that was his first rural workshop in Western Australia. And nowadays you can go and do permaculture at a TAFE. You can get it probably. So I was, 20 years earlier than.
Yes, the leading edge and the bleeding edge. That's right.
Then I think the peer counselling, well, it was Reevaluation Counselling was the organisation. That was relatively new. It was established in America. There were fledgling groups in Australia. I went to a lot of it was the work of a guy named Harvey Jackins, who was an incredible thinker, writer. Some would class it as a cult almost. I suppose the fact that his son Tim is now the world area reference person suggests something cultish, perhaps. But I've done a lot with Tim, and he was a wonderful, wonderful human being. I did one with Harvey in Hobart. They just declared or set up a community in Hobart of co-counsellors, and they put on a workshop. And 2 days into the workshop, Harvey wound the whole community up. He said, "You haven't got it right. It's all off. Go back to beginning. Go back to just doing sessions between individuals, and we'll see how you go in a year or two." So it was that was very new. The reevaluation counselling community was very much based on the basic activity were one-on-one peer sessions.
Okay. Well, let's talk about that. Why would someone do those peer sessions? Because you have now been involved in hundreds, if not thousands, of those peer sessions. What would motivate someone to say, "Oh, I want to try this peer conversations"? Of course, we put some notes together the other day that we shared at Blokes Talk Beachside. We called it One Model for Effective Sharing and Listening. As you say, it's come from the reevaluation conversations, but you call it peer. What do you call it? Peer what?
Peer counselling. But counselling's a not a good terminology, because it has common use meaning of someone who gives advice.
Yes.
And that's the last thing you do in this peer counselling. It's not about giving advice, it's about creating safety for the person who's being the client at the time and the client. And so the other difference in this setup is the client is in charge of what's going on, not the counsellor. Mm-hmm. But the stuff that the client wants to work on, where he's going with, he or she going with the stuff, is decided by the client, and the counsellor's role is to be supportive, to be encouraging, and to be a link with humanity. Sitting with someone else breaks isolation, and a lot of people's accumulated hurts, unhealed hurts, are associated with having whatever happened to them happened when they were effectively, if not literally, on their own. There was no one there who was looking after them, thinking about them, who helped them up and said, "Oh, what's that? Tell me about it." So it takes a time. Finish crying when you're ready. There's a common misconception in our culture that if you stop someone crying, you've stopped them hurting. You've stopped them healing.
Yes.
So they're then left that hurt unhealed, when the best time to heal from it is at the time. If a 3-year-old can fall over, skin their knee, lie there, cry a bit, and show the problem, and when they've finished crying, they'll get up and be bright and cheery and fully human. If you stop them healing, especially with threats of physical punishment, if you stop them with distraction or with reward or with humiliation, they're stuck again with that hurt added onto other hurts, unhealed.
And that's what you talked about. You literally talked about almost conversation or talking as a healing mechanism. Is that right?
Yeah, and the words are not to be taken literally, right? If I need to sit there going, you bastard, all you bastard up. I'm not talking to you, and it's the words I need to say at the time, perhaps. And I didn't. And once if I've said them and the session has worked well, that hurt has gone. Those words are meaningless. Then you don't come back next week and say, now last week you were doing this and we were doing it. No, it's gone. But a general theme. I mean, most trauma don't just heal in like that. You chip bits off and you work your way through. And the principle in reevaluation counselling is not what have you still got left to do. It's what is your goals? What work are you doing to make the world a better place? Environmental work, community work, political work, whatever it is. What's getting in the way? What's got in the way in the last week? And let's clear that bit.
Yeah.
So it's about. That's why I said it's not a therapy. It's about keeping people who are functioning well, like not letting them get bogged down, or themselves not avoiding getting bogged down, overworked, overcome to a point where they break down. I think I mentioned we talk about breakdown as though it's a shame and a tragedy, and my view is it's when your body goes into a healing mode, whether you're ready for it or not. Some people cry a lot, laugh a lot, tremble, shake. And the danger, of course, in our culture is they're likely to end up in a straitjacket or in an institution or drugged to the eyeballs, and the healing doesn't happen.
Blocked. That's what we often say. Is it a breakdown or is it actually breakthrough? The person really is evolving and breaking through to another level, but we see it as a breakdown, or even when they say you've cracked up or he's cracked up crying, as distinct from, as you say, crying as a healing mechanism, crying as, I think somewhere in there you talked about, was it unstressing or cleansing or somewhere in there, certainly stuff, you said we store stuff up physically in our bodies. And what we're talking about here is a discharge of emotion or a discharge of anger or a discharge of something there. So do you want to talk about that in terms, and of course, the other point you made the other day was, point number one was you said, first of all, you have to believe healing is possible. You have to believe that this distress and this suffering that you're going through can be healed. Do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, I think that's, I think that's critical. And because I've met people who've come into reevaluation counselling when I was teaching it, and they never quite got that point. It was that they would say, if I said to them, "What are your goals now for this week and this year and the next century?" And what's your goals for you and your family and your community and the world? It's good to have these notions about where you would like things to go. Sure. For as much of the universe as you can conceive of, you should have plans for it.
Well, I love Peter Drucker's quote: "The best way to predict the future is to invent it." Because if you don't invent it, someone may invent it for you when it may not be the future you actually want.
Yeah, sure. So have I answered that last question?
So that whole idea of anger discharge or upset discharge, and what's happening in talking, you're helping to release that or get rid of that upset. Is that what happens?
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be limited to talking, and also a lot of people use talking as a way of controlling the situation, and they never heal because they just they just keep talking. And
Right.
it took me to sort that out, and I was working over a number of months with someone, and I realised that she hadn't been discharge, of course, is jargon. I mean, it has meaning in reevaluation counselling, and re-stimulation is another one. But and I just, when I realised this, I just went,
yeah.
She went, away she went, crying,
Right.
sobbing, and which she was controlling, stopping happening by talking.
Yes.
So always about talking.
Yes.
I've been at men's workshops I did a few years. There's a guy named Peter White was in the Sydney community and did a lot of men's work, and he had a whole following. Half a dozen of them were bikies with tattoos, and they were tender boys.
Well, they would have a whole lot of, yeah.
And with the workshop we had wall-to-wall mattresses, and we all lay down. And of course, a lot of thing getting men to do is stop working. For Christ's sake, stop, rest, look after yourself, relax, do nothing.
Because work and being busy is a way of avoiding dealing with their hurt or their upset or their pain or their suffering. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Generally, yes. Of course. Well, and understandably, because we don't have a culture that says our primary goal here is to reclaim our full humanness and heal from all the things that have happened to us. It's like toughen up, man up, don't be a girl, fit it for blokes. Man up, don't be a girl, fit it for blokes.
Like a concrete tablet, which is part of this book you gave us and sent to all of us, this Liberation of Men book, which starts to talk about that as you say, toughen up, man. Here, why we need liberation. We men work too hard. We're taken advantage of because we need our jobs. We often feel lonely, competitive, angry. We hurt ourselves with addictive substances of many kinds, from cigarettes and caffeine to drugs and alcohol. We don't have as much closeness in our relationships as we need. We aren't as involved in our children's lives as we'd like to be. We hurt people we love and we regret it afterwards. And it goes on. There's just pages of semi-provocative statements, but they all resonate with, as you say, young boys. We play war games. We play with guns, and they assume that we're acting out our natural aggressive inclinations. Do you want to talk a bit about this book? Why did you like it so much, The Liberation of Men?
Look, I think it's what, 40 years old now, 50 maybe. It's I've done a workshop with Charlie Kreiner, who's one of the authors. I've done 2 workshops with Harvey Jackets. I've got a photo of Harvey standing under the sign pointing to Harvey.
Oh, right, yeah.
Look, it's to me the difference between men and women is there's just such an enormous overlap. We're not that different.
Yeah.
They say, oh, women can't read maps. I've got 2 sisters who can read maps in the dark with a torch, no problems whatsoever.
No. It saves thinking too hard if you generalize like that, doesn't it?
But with this one, my sister Deb, she was a Girl Scout. And at the time she was the Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. They did the same stuff.
Yeah.
And they did orienteering sort of stuff, and they did long walks in bush and various skills, and she no problem. And my other sister was a nurse, but she liked weapons, so she joined the Army Reserve, and they gave her asked her if she wanted to be a doctor. So she ended up as a Army doctor. Went to Indonesia after the tsunami. Did lots of things, and she tells the story of she said to the commander of the, because they had armoured personnel carriers with machine guns, and she said, "Can I have a go at the machine gun sergeant?" And he said, "Yes, ma'am, you may." So they set her up and set some targets, and she blasted away. And he said, "Sorry, ma'am, we won't be letting you do that again." And she said, "Why not, Sergeant?" And he said, "Because you're showing my men up."
Oh, really? Yeah.
And
Paradigm shift.
and the other one, the soldier said to her, "Ma'am, with that gun on your hip, you look like Lara Croft." And she said, "Get your eyes checked, soldier."
Yeah. Right. So let's talk about, as you say, these beliefs. If a person's going to deal with some of their suffering, and like literally one of the fellows that, I'll go, a fellow I know, literally told me last night that his wife had broken up with him. He not only did the company he was working in go into liquidation through results of nothing to do with him. So he'd already gone through major stress there. His wife then said, "Okay, it's all over." So the only good thing is that his kids are 18, 19, 20, 21. So it's not like they're young. So here's a guy literally right now going through suffering. He wants to come to our Blokes Talk Beachside. And you've said a couple of things. One, you have to believe healing is possible, because another friend of mine, I literally went to the Marion Centre. He's really, again, he's also still suffering after 2 or 3 years of a woman saying to him, "Mate, it's all over." He believed that the relationship had no problems, but anyone who knows them say, "Mate, that it was clear the relationship had problems." So he's been telling himself a story now for 2 or 3 years that, of course, as we know, the more you tell yourself a story, true or not true, the more you believe it to be true. Trump, telling the story about the election being stolen, the more times he says it verbally, publicly, the more he's vested in that story, even though it actually, is complete delusion. And this guy is deluding. So this guy, for himself to heal, as you say, has to believe healing is possible. And you also said you have to believe, the second belief was you have to believe in the fundamental goodness of human beings. Would you like to expand on those 2 beliefs? And I think from what I recall, there were 3 rules. So there may be another one in there somewhere too. So tell me about that.
Do not blame anyone else for how you're feeling.
Not blame anyone else, because that's the easiest thing, is to tell a story about everyone. It's her fault that I'm feeling this way.
Yeah. And what I say so often is, the way you're feeling is your responsibility.
Yes.
No, they're just doing what they do. And we said the other night, your model of here and the rest, from my point of view, the only thing I have control over is my thoughts, actions.
My inner world, yeah.
Is I have to regard as fixed and unchangeable, because people may not change, people may not want to change. A lot of people have resentment and unforgiveness to people who are long dead. How pointless is that? So several things. One thing about marriage, about relationships, is the old saying that women get married but they want their husbands to change, and men get married and and they don't, of course, and men want their wives to stay the same, but they don't.
No.
So you'd look around you, women, and they keep developing. They have associations, strong support, women's stuff. And blokes, same thing. Go down to the pub, have a few beers, play a bit of sport, work hard. Nothing much changes.
Yeah, they try. But I know. I mean, myself, I joke sometimes. How can an 18-year-old be 66 years of age? Like, all of my mates, we literally go and play Masters water polo in the over 65s, and even the over 72s. There was behaviour in the over 70s that was like, one guy got hit, put on a show that he was hit worse than he was, and literally the over 70s were lining up one of the big centre forwards from one of the Eastern European countries, and it was like it was 1965. It was in the old days when, okay, you've hit my mate, all 5 of us are going to have a crack at you. And it was like, these guys are over 70 and they're behaving like 18-year-olds on a footy field in 1965. So it's that piece that, as you say, blokes often essentially want to stay young, whereas you see the women, we want the wives to stay 18 still or 19, but in fact they mature into these strong, independent people that have their own thoughts, want their own careers and want their own social. What the hell? How did the world change like this? But this, so as you said, getting into stories and blaming someone else, as you say, you also made the point the other night about forgiveness, which is there that relationship between believing in the fundamental goodness of human beings and at the same time forgiving that person? You go, I'm not going to forgive them, I'm going to stay angry at them for the next 30 years. What are your thoughts on that?
Look, well, the forgiveness is based, if I think I need to forgive you, it's based on an assumption I had about you that proved to be inaccurate. Once again, my stuff, nothing to do with you. You're being the same old bastard you always do. Whatever. So the forgiveness thing is really, well, the other point I made is that in order to heal from past and usually young age incidents and mistreatment and abuse and things, you have to, even though it's seemingly irrational, you have to take responsibility for having been there and not knowing what to do.
That was a big point. That was a big point. It hit me the other day when you said that, because, you know, as a young guy working for the local chemist shop owner, and, you know, I've never said this publicly beyond this, but, you know, he used to try and touch me up, you know, places grab my penis or rub himself, and it used to freak me out. But my other mates had said, well, I'm not going to work for him. Whereas I went, but it's money and it's the paper. It's better than the paper run. And you're right. I had made the choice to stay there and also made the choice not to tell my parents, live with it myself. So when you said that the other day, that really hit me around, I have to take responsibility for staying there. And at the same time, I took responsibility of going, but I'm going to let it go. I'm not going to stay angry at the guy, because that's just going to chew me up. He's dead. So what's the use of me staying angry at him?
And there were 15 other elegant solutions that you could have come forward with. Like,
yes.
I think my hourly rates just gone up to $10 an hour, and one more close encounter and I'm off to the police. You know,
yes. And that thought, that none of those thoughts went through my head. You're right.
Yeah. And let's get on with the stock take.
Yeah. I mean,
it's all right to be smart. As someone said, I was only 3 when that happened, and what could I have done? I said, you could have set fire to the house.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that point, I mean, we do a lot of work in the area of NLP, and they talk about elegant solutions, and they certainly talk about, if you've only got one option, you're a rogue, you know, you've got a robot. If you've got 2, you're confused, but 3 or more, and you've said 15 elegant solutions. If you can train your brain to go, and that's the gap between stimulus and response, of course, is pause to go, well, what are 15 elegant solutions? What are 15 elegant options in this situation? Options you haven't even considered, but stop and pause for a second. And certainly that's where meditation comes in, where you bring down the sympathetic nervous system and stop being so over aroused to go, you know what? There's way more than one solution here. There's 15. And you just got to think of them.
Yeah. Well, that's a maxim of reevaluation counselling, is there is always at least one elegant solution to every human problem.
Yeah. Beautiful. And your point there around, hey, it's your stuff and it's your story. And sometimes you talking about your story is actually keeping you stuck or protecting you from closing the eyes or stopping and actually pausing. Is that what you're saying there?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yes, I mean, yes, we have stories. I have memories from my first marriage, and when I get together with my first wife, occasionally we have a chat, and she tells me things that I said in 1959, and not only what I said, but what I really meant when I said them.
Oh, nice.
And I say, yes, dear, I say, and about 20 minutes of that's enough. But she has a vivid memory, like an incredible memory. That's what confused me a bit, because she has been able to tell me things that we did that happened, what people said. But then occasionally I go, nah, that wasn't what happened. That didn't happen.
So she's remembered it or recoded it.
Yeah. Oft repeated lies become truths.
Yes.
Yes.
You
but
now
not even intentionally. Just I don't have a discussion with three mates about what happened at that night, and they'll all be different.
Yes.
Different accounts of one set of circumstances. So.
Yeah, I said here, using words to elicit healing. And in the handout here, some of those wonderful questions to help people around what's new or good in your life at the moment, or then what's upsetting you at the moment, or what. But you talked about one of the questions I think you used was where are you feeling stuck? Was that a question?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, that's I mean, as a structure for learning. I mean, learning reevaluation counselling is a process that happens over a 10-week course.
Right.
It's not sit down and do one session.
No.
Unfortunately, the community, as far as I've talked to the woman who's leading the community currently, and they don't have a lot of resources currently. COVID really knocked the reevaluation counselling community, because a lot of it was face to face, and now they're sort of, a lot of it now is Zoom and FaceTime.
But when someone enters a reevaluation counselling program, it's not a one session. You're committing to a 10-week journey. Is that what you're saying?
There are accredited teachers, of which I was one for 15 years or so. The teacher vets people who want to do a course. If someone,
to be instructors or to participate in the actual
participate in the community.
To be in the community. Yeah.
So, and it's the question is about where are you able to be there for someone else?
Yes.
People aren't. They simply aren't. They don't. They just talk about themselves, basically.
Well, that's it. Let's just talk about that, because I've got the note in front of me there. Be present. What does that mean? You've just said some people are not capable of being present. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And well, if the present time is safe, usually, unless you happen to be in Gaza and thing right now. But if you're doing what you're doing with awareness, in a relaxed manner, you're present, usually. If you're doing it and worried about what's happened, or guilt or fear of something, you're not present, because half your attention is on that. If you're worried about what's going to happen in the future, you're not present.
Yes.
So this is like Buddhist stuff, be in the moment, be here now, all that stuff.
And you're saying be present for the other person, as distinct from what happens sometimes in conversations. Sorry.
But even for your own healing, the idea is to pay sufficient attention to something that happened long ago. It's very easy to run a workshop and get everyone totally re-stimulated with their old stuff, and then overwhelmed by it.
Yes.
So, and the purpose of the counsellor in the reevaluation counselling is to stop the client putting too much attention on what was the original stuff.
Yes.
And a good way is to go, something happened, even though something happened, doesn't matter what, it's left me with these feelings and these strange behaviours and these inabilities. And what I need to do is act out, stopping that whatever happened, or I remember working for a time about, while my father was away in Darwin during the war, I wanted the war to end. So my counsellor had me saying, I brought World War II to an end so that my dad.
Right. And
there's a and there's
Interesting.
another. There's an interesting, like it's a bit of a story, but to people who feel most of us sometimes feel we're not part of, this the craziness of the world, the ridiculous things that happen. It's not us at all, and it's a bit of a technique to tell that person if they haven't heard it before. Look! I've got news for you. You're actually not from here. You're actually from a race of incredible beings who travel through time and space and saved the whole civilizations and whole planets. And they were on their way to a very dangerous job, so they dropped you off here, but they're coming back. So yeah, so I don't know. So that makes people laugh. That makes people cry. It's a healing. It's a healing process.
The healing.
Yeah.
Let's talk about talking of other here. I said the other note you said was listen lovingly. Listen lovingly. You're not listening on the basis of I've got to say something. You've also said this is not therapy. But what does listen lovingly mean to you when you say that?
Well, I mean, love is the greatest. I love ice cream. I love small dogs. I love Joni Mitchell. What does that mean? Nothing. They're all different. I mean, love is the most used and abused, and of course the worst one is "but I love you." Yeah. Well, why did you just punch me out? Oh, because I love you.
Yeah.
So the counselling definition of love is it's the way human beings feel about each other when there's nothing in the way.
When there's nothing in the way.
When both of them are clear, when there's nothing in the way. There's no stored hurts that associate you with someone else and me or someone and that and fear and it's a natural being and it's common. I can think of 15 people that I would say I love dearly.
Yeah.
I do. I've known them. I've watched their life. I've done things. We've done things together, and I love them. That's nothing to do with sex. It's nothing to do with an attachment or owning them or an obligation. No, it's just the way I feel when I see that person. So
there's nothing as you say, there's nothing in the way, as in I'm not wanting anything from the person, or there's no judgment. There's a kind of a much clearer. I like the Aboriginals talk about ayan, the connection from the almost like the energetic connection they talk about from the belly through the window of the soul. It's like there's nothing, we're not trying to win each other. There's no power play. It's just we love each other as two human beings.
Yep, that's good. And the other thing when you were talking about your friend and his marriage, marriages are a get together for a purpose, and it's fundamentally to raise a family.
Yes.
And by the time they're all 18, 19 and off to do their things, you've done that. Now, what are you going to do? Are you going to keep pretending that you're there to nesting? Well, you're not there nesting. You're out playing bowls and doing volunteer at the Serpy and doing a degree or something. So there's no to see a marriage as inevitably and definitely needs to be permanent. It doesn't. Sometimes its purpose is finished.
Yes.
Oh, the last kids have left home. What are you going to do? I thought I might go sailing around the South Pacific for a while. You've always wanted to go and climb Mount Everest. I'll see you later.
Yeah. I think that whole Saturday afternoon thing of you sign up in front of your friends till death do us part. They were stuck with it. Mate, I was saying to someone the other day, if I go to Floret Shopping Centre during the week at around midday, well, in fact, my mate and I had a lunch at the kind of the Chinese, Japanese joint, and the coffee club at Floret Shopping Centre, there are all these guys and their wives. The guys and the wives, they're in their 60s and 70s and maybe even in their 80s, and they're just looking at each other. And you can just see, like, what are we doing here? You know, there's such. Now I'm hallucinating, of course. It's my reaction to it, but the lack of life, the lack of joy, and you can just see there's got to be more to retirement than sitting at the coffee club with your partner of 133 years, looking at each other with nothing to say. And you can see these people, there's nothing to say. They're just looking at it. I'm going, mate, if that's retirement and that's a happy marriage in our 70s and 80s, like, forget it. There's just a lack of. Now, the people at the coffee club love it because the highlight of their day is that they've gone, you know, the people, the highlight of their day, in my opinion, is they've gone there, they've had a cup of coffee, they've had a piece of cake, and hopefully they've been able to speak to someone else other than each other. It's like, man, there's got to be more to life. There's got to be more to life than that. I want to go on to a couple of other things, Steve. Yep. You got into EFT, emotional freedom technique, and you also got into Butenko breathing. So, and you talked about intermittent fasting and you talked about humming. So do you want to touch on each of those things as healing, helping mechanisms for obviously not just men, but for women as well, but in the context of men and men healing and being as good as they can be, living their best life?
Yeah, well, working backwards through those, I in the last 5 years, I've done a lot of singing and singing workshops and joined a choir and was president of the choir till recently. But that was mainly to sort out a disaster that happened and there's nowadays it's well established that singing is one of the most healthy things that we can do, and singing in a choir is a wonderful human activity. There's 20 people and we're all focusing on producing a result, and we rehearse and we come together and we chat while we're doing it, and then the physicality of singing, and especially humming. The humming creates nitric oxide through these passages.
Fantastic.
And that's a very healthy thing to be happening. So if you're not going to join a choir, just hum.
Which reminds me, you know, Buddhist chanting and so on, you imagine might have a similar. In terms of nitric oxide and the vibration up through this part of the nose. The
old throat singing, all that stuff. Anyway, so I advocate join a choir, and of course the pub choir is a phenomenon, a recent phenomenon that is incredible. People pay up to, the last time pub choir came to Perth, they were at Subiaco, people were paying $70 to go along and learn a song and sing it and go home.
Wow.
and they this woman, Ingrid Astrid Jorgensen, is a phenomenal. If you haven't looked at the actual, not the general, like a lot of people are using the terminology, but the original pub choir run by Astrid Jorgensen, look it up on the internet. It's amazing. They've got an edited version of Africa with 18,000 people in total singing. They
oh my God!
They get 1,800 people or 1,700 turn up to one gig in Brisbane or Sydney, and pay and learn a song and sing it, and they record it. It's just amazing. So and
clearly, it's the vibration and the sense of connection that must be created. You can just as I say, if everything is vibration, the beautiful vibration and the kind of the love vibration created when all these people are singing like that, I can just imagine it. So they're happily paying $70 to get that therapy. Yeah.
Although I did see a recording of a song called "I'm a Creep," I think it was called. that's Nirvana. Yeah, people enjoyed singing it.
I'm a creep. I'm a weirdo. What the hell am I doing here? I don't belong here. Yeah, it's a very special song.
People, so to be able to say those words out loud in the company of others, and we're all doing it and having fun.
Wow, so, music is therapy there. Yeah,
is a healing process. So
wow.
Yes, so you had
intermittent fasting, Butenko breathing, and tapping. Yeah.
I think, and I've recently cut out one meal a day. I don't have breakfast. and I eat late, usually in the middle of 2 o'clock perhaps, and then an evening meal, ideally lighter and not too late, and then 16 hours or so of not eating, in which I hope and believe and hope that my body is getting rid of toxins and doing the repair that it needs to do.
Well, so I was just listening to a podcast, Sadhguru, this morning, Indian yogic, talking about the power and value of fasting, because literally taking in food on a regular basis is putting the body under pressure. Whereas, as you say, the fasting allows for the toxins and a cleansing and a healing process to actually go on. And you're certainly not going to die by most people look at the obesity levels around the Western world. It's certainly not from under eating. So cutting out a meal and managing it is clearly much healthier than being massively overweight, which is what the vast majority of the West are doing.
I grew up assuming that if I didn't get 3 meals a day, I'd probably die.
Yes.
Because that's what we all did, and everyone, and then some people had a lot of snacks in between.
No, it's outrageous, isn't it? So no, but there's no doubt the Indians, and there's been tons of research since been showing how fasting literally gives the body time to heal, the lymphatic system, the toxins to get out, the livers, the kidney, all of those things to get a chance to go back to some degree of homeostasis rather than elevated levels of toxins and of course things like gallbladder and kidney and all sorts of stuff. So let's talk about Butenko breathing, which is just fascinating. Buteiko. I always pronounce it wrong. Buteiko breathing.
Well, in Russian it's Buteyko, but the anglicised version is Buteiko. Or my advertising rep used to call me Steve Potato.
Oh, yeah.
But it was Buteyko. Is the work of Konstantin Buteyko, who was a Soviet. Well, he was an engineer before World War II, and then he retrained and did medicine. And he had some influences with yoga and other Eastern practices, but he basically, well, the story goes, he noted when he was in a ward with terminal patients that the more they breathed, the closer they were to death, basically.
Yeah.
And then he associated a lot of their symptoms, like the asthmatics who would have asthma, if he got them to shut their mouths and breathe less, the asthma went away. Asthma is not a disease; it's a defense against overbreathing. Sleep apnea.
I mean, let's just say that again. Asthma is not a disease; it's a defense against overbreathing.
Overbreathing. You can die from hyperventilating. Right? You don't die from asthma. Asthma just is your bronchi going, can we have this much, not that much? Right?
It's the person's overbreathing.
Overbreathing, that's true.
Wow.
And lots of things, our diets, our lifestyles, our television things. I watched 2 episodes of Fargo last night, and I resolved that was a mistake. I don't want to watch that stuff.
Yeah.
It's clever, it's well acted, but there's a lot of gratuitous violence. And I suppose the secret of that is that and there was a previous series with a woman. It was something about revenge or retribution, I think it was called, something like that.
Wow.
Where this woman was outrageous. She was on a vengeance. It was retribution, it was called. She'd been mistreated by a bikie gang or something, and she set about getting her justice and killed them all. But so there's cleverness and there's good acting, but I don't need to watch that stuff happening.
Yeah, it's not necessarily good for your mental health.
So I'm not going to watch the rest of it. But
so coming back to Buteyko, yeah.
Buteyko, it's fundamentally the basic principle is that the problem is with most people is that we, as a culture, breathe too much.
Yeah.
That some of the, if there's not a lot of primitive cultures left, but if you study them, they breathe a whole lot less, and they breathe through their nose and they use their diaphragm. And the more technological and advanced and we are, the less, the more likely it is we're mouth breathing and over breathing and being in a sympathetic nervous dominant state, or very close to it. I observed someone the other day who I thought of as a relatively calm and pleasant chap, and something had happened and it just flipped him. It was just suddenly he was raging and he said, this shouldn't happen, and I'm not going to put up with this, and I didn't come here to do this. I thought, wow, you were very close to
the edge, so to speak, anyway, the tipping point.
The aim is certainly to be parasympathetic dominant and to use your diaphragm, your nasal breathing for conditioning the air that we breathe and for giving your body the opportunity to actually regulate how much air you're getting simply through nasal passages by putting mucus in or constricting them, slowing breathing down generally.
And that surgical tape you showed, what that was, we literally, you literally tape it up. What's it called, that tape? Is it called cervical?
That's 1 inch or 25 mil micropore, usually. Micropore, live pore, anything with PORE on the end of it. But just surgical paper tape or surgical paper tape, 1 inch wide.
Because I had one of the guys from Blokes Talk say, Leigh, what was that tape he said again? Because I've got to send him that. So surgical paper tape, 25 mil micro pore. Great. And literally, now, do you do that every night or do it just enough to go, I've trained myself to...
Different. I've got colleagues who say, oh, you don't have to, you've just got to retrain. You've just got, but I've always had, when I was really busy, I would buy boxes of 144 rolls at a time to give to my clients.
I'll give to your clients, right?
So I always had access to it, and I was a snorer and a sleep apnea person before it was even famous or you know.
Well, it's an industry, isn't it? I mean, that company that actually built all those sleep apnea machines and all the sleep clinics went through the roof in terms of stock market. So, you know, there's money in it.
Nobel Prize for medicine, yeah, as well, yeah. But the story, I've got a colleague who well, it's his story. I believe him. He said he was visiting Sydney and he rang the ResMed people and said, "I'm going to run some workshops. Can I use your training room?" And they said, "Sure, Roger." And he said, "And have you got any staff want to do the course?" And he said, and they said, "Oh, we'll ask." Anyway, about 5 of them did. And these staff witnessed someone eliminating sleep apnea over the course of the week that they ran this course. One of them resigned on the spot, and the rest were in open revolt saying, "Why aren't we taking into account that, you know?"
Wow. Vested interest. Vested interest. Wow.
Yeah. So, but there are always other subtle causes and differences and medical opinions, and you've got to quote standard, trials and double-blinded. Well, how do you do a double-blinded tape your mouth up study?
Yeah. It's a very cheap study. Let's talk about yep.
Oh well, so initially that method was just perfect for asthma, because you could take an asthmatic, get them off their bronchodilator medication quickly, because in the old days that was just Ventolin and you only took it when you needed it. So if you could give them other exercises that would stop the asthma, then they didn't need the medication. The other problem is, of course, now at later times the main medications become long-acting bronchodilators, and there's a paper I've read that says, in their opinion, 80% of all asthma deaths are due to long-acting bronchodilators.
Oh my goodness! But
there's, once again, it's a massive industry, and also people don't want to do. In our culture, we generally don't want to do the work. We want to now I have to retrain their breathing. That takes,
Take the pill, or do the
pretty much.
puffer.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the other thing that happens, of course, is people's identity starts to get tied up with their disability, as in, I'm an asthmatic. I have to have a puffer. Well, we can get you so you don't have a puffer anymore.
Or don't, I can't do that. Sorry, I can't do that.
Yeah, the brain gets shut down.
I had it. There was a young woman I knew. She was born the same. Friend of mine, lifetime friend of one of my daughters, who was asthmatic. And once I was doing this, I said to her, "Look, I can get rid of this for you." She said, "No, thanks. It's very handy in dealing with my mother."
Oh, goodness, yes.
Yes, yeah.
There's other payoffs.
It was come down on us, you'd go.
Yeah. You have to stop putting pressure on me. Look at what's happening to me. Steve, I'm going to have to go because time is running out.
Yeah.
But I think we should do another session. Clearly, we're going to do ongoing things with Blokes Talk Beachside. But I suppose I do want to ask you a question here. What motivates Steve Lumsdaine to be doing what he's doing? At the age you are, super healthy anyway, but what motivates you? What's the driving force?
Oh, look, I get satisfaction from contributing. It's my contribution to the culture, I suppose, to society. And it's trivial. If I've affected 2,000 people, that's not much in the whole world population. And a lot of them would have forgotten about it over time and gone back to their buildings. But and it's also a lot of it, sadly, was my social life. Like people would come and I'd have 3 months of interaction with them, and then they'd go away, and I'd think, oh, bugger. And of course, being strict about no fraternising and all that, and
yes,
proper client-patient relationship. So in a way, it was satisfying, and because there was always more coming and more going. But really nowadays, where I'm basically semi-retired, I just feel an obligation to share what I know.
Yeah.
There was no credit I didn't go out searching for the information. I came upon it, and I'm happy to pass it on while I can.
Well, through your guided apathy, it's come to you. But even the other night, look, one of the guys, Bryce, has sent me through a note just the other day going, you really pushed my button around that forgiveness thing. But he goes, I decided to forgive that guy, and he's written it up on our Blokes Talk Beachside. And he's gone, I forgot. Let me just read it to you, talking about, did you make a difference? Here's just one story. Hi, brothers in arms. After listening to Steve on Monday night in relation to clearing away rubbish and chatter that can occupy our minds, I decided to forgive a very long-term friend over an issue that occurred a couple of years ago. The chatter was becoming relentless. Do I cancel his friendship? Do I bury it and move on? Well, I've forgiven him, and there's positive signs already. What a relief to have cleared that off the table. I literally felt myself breathing easier, walking taller, feeling calmer. As Steve said, fundamentally, there is good in everyone. Lighten our load, friends. See you soon. Take care of yourselves. Well, that's a difference you made. And that was just one of the 20 or so guys in the room, mate. So it was well. Now, the other thing, I'm just going to finish off because I hadn't got to this part of the liberation of men, but I think it's a lovely piece to finish off on. It's called The Men's Commitment, which I'm sure you're familiar with, but I don't recall seeing it. The Men's Commitment. I promise that from this moment on, I'll be proud to be a male and will seek closeness and brotherhood with every other man of every age, race, nation, and class. I'll permit no slandering or disrespect or blaming of any man for the hurts which have been placed upon him, and I'll seek to restore safety to all men to discharge these cruel hurts. I will fight to the end and eliminate the burdening of men with over-fatigue, over-responsibility, and coercion into armed service in which we have been brutalized and forced to kill or be killed. I will cherish my birthright of being a good, intelligent, courageous, and powerful male human. Steve, I think there's no doubt that's what you're doing right now, and you've done for many years. Mate, I want to thank you for your participation in this podcast. Is there anything you'd like to say before we wrap up?
Look, yeah, I like to say, well, it's the thing that comes to mind, which is maybe contrary to all this, is you can choose your family, you can't choose your friends.
Yeah. Wow, that's right.
I've got friends I've known for 40, 50 years, and I don't really like them, but they're friends. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, there's degrees in friendship. I think, as you say, I got a very good mate who at one stage said I was his best friend, and then years later had said, well, Leigh, some of us have to actually move on. And it literally felt like a divorce, but I know where it came from. His darling wife just didn't like us being that close. And as time goes on, we are still friends, but we know where the friendship, the boundaries of that friendship. Yet I've got other friends, new friends, certainly my swimming friends, male and female. We feel incredibly close to each other. There's a degree of love, trust, safety. But it is, as you say, non-sexual, just wonderful humaneness and humanness that we have. So, Steve, I want to say thank you very much for participating on Leading Your Best Life. And let's do this again at some point in the future and elaborate. And we'll continue to help men, the mental health of men, obviously, and women as well, help everyone lead their best life as human beings. Thank you very much, Steve. I'll see you again very soon.
Thank you, Leigh. Keep on the good work.
Thanks, mate. See you soon.